Well, here we are again over another cup of afternoon tea with Chandrakant. So in the times that we've been together, I've started very close to the beginning with a statement from Babaji that although true realization is attained through actual practice, in the beginning, correct knowledge is needed. And that correct knowledge, as described by Patanjali, is direct perception, inference, scriptural authority of which the Guru's word is considered to be a part. And in that light, very close to the beginning, I've also asked each of us, when we've come together, what is it that you really believe about yourself? Because what you believe about yourself determines the way you see yourself, you see others, and you see the world. Yeah, and if you see yourself as sort of a goofy, off-centered, wacky beanbag, you usually will see other people as, off-centered, wacky beanbags. If you see yourself as a sort of body-mind apparatus, you see other people and you relate to the world as, body-mind apparatus. And, from the Chitta Prankriya, when I asked you, do you think that anybody else in the room, there are no thoughts or things in ways of body, all of that is any different than yours? And you said no. So as you see yourself as consciousness, then you see the others, and you see the world as consciousness. So it's very important what you believe about yourself. And as I've been watching, our times together, I can imagine that gets lost as, I go on and on and on about a lot of other things. But it's absolutely fundamental, and it's meant for you to reflect upon it. And I'm imagining that, with the meditation kind of endeavors, prana kriya, it's very easy to get caught up in prana kriyas being the thing itself, although I've said that it's not over and over and over again. So I wanted to once again come back to the very beginning. I think you have heard me say that what I'm up for is actually changing the starting point of American physical yoga. The starting point. Remember, if we go out, we're going on a field trip, we go out the gate and if we're going to west, we better start going west rather than to the east. So from the beginning, what is it through direct perception, correct knowledge, would be very, very helpful. And as Babaji said, even needed. So I thought I would use this initial getting together once again over tea to come back to the starting point. And not so much this time of what you believe about yourself, but to ask you through your own direct perception, where is the only place that you exist? Think about that for a moment. Pause there. Where is the only place that you exist? I mean, after all we've been through, I would imagine that you would have to say, well, here, now. Here, now. I mean, is it possible for you to go back and experience when you sat down in front of the computer and started to watch this? Can you go? No. You can certainly have a memory about that, Memory being aware of a thought about an experience you had in the past that you're not having now, because the place that you actually exist through your own direct perception, it's self-evident here and now. And if you just sort of, I don't know, scan the entire bandwidth of your life, has it ever been anything other than here and now? I mean, when you got up this morning, it seemed like here and now. When you were brushing your teeth, it's here and now. You had your morning tea, it's here and now. And, Gurdjieff has made those comments, no matter where you go, there you are. Well, how is that? Because you're only here now. He says, when you get there, it's just another here. So your own direct perception, this is important, your own direct perception reveals that the only place that you actually exist is here now. And just stop for a moment and give that some attention. Now let me just qualify a little bit, because there's a lot of concepts around what here and now actually is. Here usually has some relationship to some concepts about space. And now is usually it's a super thin time between the past and the future. Oh, excuse me, I slipped into the past there. I had to come. How fast is now actually moving? So we can get all caught up, but a much more accurate way of saying this here and now is the reason you can say here and now through these old concepts of time and space is because there's a recognition of some presence. Not the present, relative to, but presence itself. Because presence only takes place or is revealed here and now, but this presence is the presence that was present when you got up in the morning, when you brushed your teeth, when you sat down to watch it. It's been, I've asked on a number of occasions, have you ever had an experience that you weren't aware of? And even if you say, well, I wasn't aware, how would you know that unless you were, this aware, presence is another word, a synonym for this knowing awareness. Okay, we're okay with that? Presence. And as a matter of fact, when and I'll speak about it in the next video, when we went through the Kriya of Chitta Pran, what you recognize about yourself, no thoughts of things, no ways, do I need to go through that? It was presence. And it was self-evident, because there were no thoughts, no things, no age, no body, no gender, no mass, no weight, no size, no color, no depth, no location. It was self-evident without an object to verify it. And remember, we're starting out with what Bapaji said, correct knowledge. So if that's the case, that you've never been anywhere other than present, what's wrong with this? Until you think about it. Think about that. So you've had the direct perception of presence, self-evident awareness without an object. There were no thoughts or no things. You've recognized that for yourself, and you can see from this little interaction here that there's really nothing wrong with this. There's no thingness to until you think about it. You thoughts being a thing. Gurda speaks about that. So the starting point in your sadhana is hugely related to this understanding. Because if we launch out by trying to become something in the future that we're not now, as Gurudev says, when you get there, it's just going to be here. So there must be something so essential all the time, now, without time, just presence. I can't use the word time, just present. That we investigate, we look, we turn towards what is here now all the time. And the reason that I mention what is here now all the time is just so you don't think I'm making this up. The first sutra, now an exposition on yoga. Many times as we listen to folks who will, try to inspire us, encourage us with the sutra, the yoga, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, this now an exposition on yoga is kind of like, it's the introduction, we've been engaged in this ignorant stuff for so long. We've beat ourselves bloody. We've gotten a stupid. We've chased after desire, and we've ran from this and that, and we're just a mess. We're just a mess, and we're about ready to throw up our hands and say, "Okay, I surrender. I give up. Now." That's one way of looking at this, but in terms of what we're investigating in this meditation in motion, it's not very insightful. But in the light of what I've just said, if your own experience reveals to you that you have never been any place other, and I'm using that loosely, than now, Patanjali starts by giving you the correct knowledge that it's always now, and that's where yoga evolves, opens up. And it's not about creating something that you're not. Because in the second sutra, he says this yoga stuff is yogasha chitta vritti nirodha. It's the witnessing of mental modifications in the mind. So, what's wrong with this? Nothing until you think about it. Oh, there you go, some mental modifications. You're always in yoga when you're witnessing the modifications that are constantly present. Am I making sense? Because you haven't been any place other than here now. Patanjali is saying this is where yoga takes place. You don't need a yoga mat. You don't need, special clothes. You don't need any flexibility. If ignorance is the problem, flexibility is not the solution. If ignorance is the problem, prana kriya is not the solution. What is present when you're working on flexibility or in prana kriya, that is very important because it's presence. So we can see from the very beginning, Patanjali was saying the same thing that Bapaji was saying. In the beginning, correct knowledge is needed because we're no longer interested of something taking place, happening in the future, some, blinding, flashing light, some strong experience. You see devas, you get a siddhi, you can. We're looking so closely into this, as in, what's wrong with this? Until you think about it. So the first encouragement is to, as Gurudev has said, witnessing the modifications of mind. This word witnessing, niroda, yogasha chitta vritti, niroda. Niroda seems to have a number of definitions when you start looking it up. And two of the more common ones, which has caused tremendous struggle and self-created suffering, is cessation and stoppage, interpreted as when you can cease or stop the mental modifications in the mind. That's yoga. I don't know about you, but that doesn't seem to go too well. But if you understand the first sutra, now, what's wrong with now? Until you think about it. So now the witnessing aspect becomes much more of something that you don't have to wait to do. You're the constant. That's who you are. You are the constant witness. And Patanjali says, if you are able to be this niro, this witnessing, this cessation of, let me say here that mind is not an entity. Nobody's ever, opened to them and said, oh, there's mind right there. Mind is an activity. So when the activity is witnessed, ceases, or stops, he clearly says the flowering of yoga is then the seer abides in its own nature. As in, what's wrong with this?
No thoughts, no things, no age, no body, no gender, no edges, no hue, no mass, no weight, no size, no color, no density, and no location.
The seer is constantly abiding in its own nature, but when you are unable to be that nirodha, it says in the fourth sutra, it says, if you can't do the witnessing and the seer abiding in its own nature, it appears as though this seer takes on the form of the mental modification. It just appears that way. Because you're never any place other than, it's simply an appearance. And we've all had the experience over and over again of things that have appeared and we're going, oh my God, how will I make it through this day? Here we are, doing well enough. That appearance has disappeared. And this witnessing presence has now perhaps gotten tangled up in some other mishigas. So this segment, where is the only place that you exist? This segment is to bring you back to the starting point. As revealers, it's our endeavor to actually make a contribution and move American physical yoga into energy yoga. And I'll say a little bit more about that in the next video, but please, between now and then, just ask yourself, any time during the day, you're sitting in traffic and you start to hear the mishigas go on, just ask yourself, where do I really exist? And cultivate a quality of listening to yourself, quotated, so that you can recognize that spacious, unmodified awareness is constantly present. You're in the middle of, you're out in there you are in the supermarket, trying to, and just ask, you can feel the contraction. Just ask yourself, where do I actually exist? And once that, just ask the second question, what's wrong with this? And see for yourself, nothing, no thing. is wrong with this until I thingify it with thoughts, memories, projections, beliefs, imaginations. That which we are taking Babaji's encouragement to look into in the beginning, correct knowledge is needed. The correct knowledge, this presence that you are, is prior to thoughts, feelings, beliefs, imaginations, opinions, commonly referred to as mishigas. So I'm putting this at the front of our time together so that it brings attention to this question. You have to make the answer to this valuable in your life. This is what unlocks all the rest of what we are doing referred to as yoga. Because if you think you're still in lockdown into this limited body-mind apparatus, it's gonna be a long endeavor. But when you recognize from your own perception that the only place you truly exist is as this constant knowing presence, I think that's about enough. So I leave you with, what's wrong with this? Jai Bhagwan.